Welcome to episode 37 of the Consciousness Collective podcast. This week we are talking about magic, menstrual magic, and how we can sync our lives with our menstrual cycles for optimal living, performance, and alignment in our life and business. In this episode, I have a conversation with holistic business coach and cyclical living practitioner Leticia Ringe. We talk about her transition from burned out lawyer to entrepreneur and how she's leveraged the wisdom and power of her cycle for creativity, intuitive insight, connection, and so much more. Now is a great time to tune into our natural rhythms and be in the flow of life as guided by our cycles. Just to note, for those not currently experiencing a menstrual cycle, we talk about using the moon cycle as another way to foster this way of living. I'm so excited to bring you this episode. Let's go to the show. Okay, everybody, welcome to the show. I am here with Leticia Ringe. Leticia is a holistic business coach, a cyclical living facilitator, and the host of the podcast, Create a Life That Is Beautiful. Today, we are talking about menstrual magic. So how we as individuals and business owners and women in general can harmonize our cycles with our life. This is really an ancient wisdom that many of us have completely forgotten about. But when we can remember it and begin to live in this cyclical harmony, it can really create magic in our lives. So that's really what we're going to dive into in today's episode. To start, Leticia, I want to hear about your awakening journey and how you kind of found yourself in this role as a woman's business coach working specifically with cyclical living.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I just want to say, hi, Meghan. I'm so happy to be here on the podcast. I love this conversation and where we're going. And I feel like cyclical living has been such a huge catalyst for change in my life, even just on my own awakening journey. And then I've been able to infuse that into my business as I created it. So I'm so happy to be able to share this beautiful concept with everyone today. So basically, I used to be a lawyer, which was a very different way of operating in the world to how I operate in the world today. I was very mental and so very much in my mind and hustling and striving and disconnected from my body, although I didn't know it at the time. And what was the catalyst for my awakening was that I had a lot of pain in my stomach, and this was happening when the only thing I was connected to my body for was exercising, which I think lots of people can relate to that. So I would go out and I'd run, and I loved running. It lit up my soul. It was just such a beautiful part of my day. But I would also have super intense work days as a lawyer, and then I would go out and run. So everything was do, and then I would socialize, all about the output. And so one day my body started to just get louder and louder with the pain I was experiencing around menstruation. And it would lead me to going out for a run and then collapsing, like literally being on the floor in severe pain, my whole body in just like goosebumps all over it, not knowing what I needed, just this excruciating pain. And people would ask me, is it a stitch? And I was like, no, it's definitely not a stitch. It was more like a really intense period pain for anyone who's experienced that before, but it was all throughout my abdomen, and the pain was so severe it like spread from head to toe.
And would it happen even when you weren't menstruating? Like it would just happen at random times?
It actually seemed to happen in the lead up. So during my luteal phase, during when we usually have those PMS symptoms. And so it was happening every single month. And during my menstruation, I would tend not to run as hard, but this was happening like just so often. And it was getting louder and louder and louder. I couldn't go for a run without it happening. And so that I started going to doctors, and I'd already been to doctors and told them I'd always had like intense periods. I'd always had painful period pain. And so this was now like escalating, and I knew that it was connected because the pain was so similar to that period pain that I was getting. It was just like amplified. So as is usual for women, when we go to doctors and try to and talk about these pain that we feel for anything like PCOS, endometriosis, painful periods, we're not believed, and it's just seen as, okay, we'll go on the pill. And thankfully I had been on the pill for so many years by that point, and I didn't like the way my body responded to it. So I was like, no, I don't want to go on the pill again. I want to get this sorted. Why is my body responding in this way? And so I bounced around with doctors until I met a beautiful doctor who said, okay, let's get this tested again. And so we went and got, an ultrasound, and there was probable endometriosis. And so that was such a relief for me, because I finally had something that I could explore, and also just validation that something was going wrong in my body. And so this led me to looking at, okay, how could I heal this? How could I heal endometriosis, and exploring that? And so I went to a specialist, and they said, you should have a surgery. And I really didn't want to have a surgery. So thankfully I knew enough to ask questions. And so I said, well, is there any other alternatives to surgery? And then the specialist said, yeah, actually there is. If you can withstand the pain, you might be able to try other options for healing it, or you could go on medication. And so I thought, okay, this means that it's not so severe that I need to get it done right now. So I'm going to explore alternative ways of healing this. And one of my beautiful friends sent me a podcast at that time with a woman called Elisa Vitti from Flow Living. She has a book called A Woman's Code, which is amazing if anyone wants to learn more about the cycle. And it was on a podcast called The Lively Show, which is still one of my favorite podcasts today.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Jess Lively. I'm doing her inner voice facilitation training at the moment. Yeah, so good. And yes, anyway, the episode was all about cyclical living, and it was about how so many women are experiencing PCOS, endometriosis, and so many other cycle related conditions, and we're being told to go on the pill, and that's just covering up the symptoms, not creating a solution. And her approach to healing it is that we're not meant to be working on a 24-hour hormonal cycle like the male hormonal cycle. We're supposed to be operating over roughly 28 days, or however long your cycle is as a woman. And that means that we need different things at different times of the cycle. And that, from her perspective, she was talking about food and exercising, and also self-care. And so this, for the first time, tapped me into my body and how it is right now, rather than how I wanted it to be. And rather than trying to squeeze myself into a box like I was doing in all aspects of my life, trying to be something. And so this just started a conversation with my body, which then, as I discovered, my intuition, and that led me to realizing, look, things really need to change. And I've been ignoring a lot of signs for a long time that I'm not where I need to be. So I had a really wonderful opportunity to move overseas with my partner. So we moved to London. He is still today a lawyer. And I used that opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and to find my purpose, because that was something that I'd wanted to find from the moment I learned about what purpose was in high school, and I knew I wasn't aligned with it. So that started my self-discovery journey, and since then it's been just a process of deepening into learning how to work with my cycle. And so when I started my business, then about a year and a half later, I already had these tools, and I knew that I didn't want to set up my business like the corporate structure that I had been working in for 10 years. And I wanted to infuse this beautiful system into my business. And so that led me to going on a learning process with how that could look and practically implementing that, and then also exploring the spiritual and the creative side of cyclical living, which is what really lights me up so much today.
Amazing. And I really want to dive into what that means to sync your business with your cycle. And, we've had this conversation before. a while ago about, what kind of stuff should we be doing and not doing at various stages of our cycle, which of our strengths are heightened at certain times. And it's really fascinating. But first, I need to know, did you heal your endometriosis? Like, did all of these painful symptoms go away?
So first of all, I actually have never you have to have a surgery to confirm that you have endometriosis. So I've never had the surgery. So it's just, I try not to even associate with the condition anymore. But a lot of my symptoms have gone, but I still do have painful periods. But the thing is, I know why that's happened. So for instance, if I've traveled a lot, if I've eaten a lot of sugar, if I've been really stressed, my body will show me that in my period. And this is what's really beautiful, because whatever's happening for you during menstruation and around it, like whatever pain is coming up at any phase of the cycle, it's showing you something on a self-care or a spiritual perspective that needs to be fixed. And it's so present moment focused. So it's usually something that's happened in that past month. And if we don't give ourselves the time to properly rest during menstruation, you'll usually see that the next time that you menstruate. So for me, my body is always communicating and speaking to me. And I definitely have experienced a painful period still, but maybe not to the same, it's definitely not, I don't ever get that same collapsing on the ground ever. I haven't had that since I've been working with my cycle, but the painful periods is still with me. And it's really interesting because conditions like endometriosis can be connected to an unexpressed creativity. And it's so fascinating, because that is exactly what I discovered was what I was seeking as a lawyer more than anything. Was I didn't think I was a creative person. So I thought there are only certain professions that are okay for me to do. And as I discovered along this journey with our bodies, we're all designed to create. We're all creative. We're all creators. And so for me, tapping into my creativity has healed my symptoms as well. So it's it's just been such a beautiful self-discovery process for sure. But I do get the occasional, like just recently I had a bad period pain, and I'd been traveling and doing all of these things like with and I also feel with what's going on globally at the moment, it was just, I need more rest at the moment. So I have to honor that with my body. And I've really realized that, the impact that global events are having, even when you don't feel personally impacted, we can't help but, pick up the energy around us. And on some level that's stressful to the body. And for me, just being in the airport and moving around, like that has an impact on our body, even if we don't necessarily realize it at the time.
Yeah, I like how you said that, how you're now able to tune into your body more and receive the wisdom that your body is trying to tell you through these symptoms that, we often judge as being negative in our culture, but really they're just opportunities for us to explore within. And I had a conversation with Shay Savage, who's also in the Consciousness Collective, and she works a lot with like the sacral chakra area. And she kind of reiterated the same thing, like these PMS symptoms are opportunities to look at our shadow self. They're opportunities to look at what's not working and what may need to shift in our life. And after my first conversation with you, when we talked about this, which was the first time I really began to understand what cyclical living was. And for me, prior to that point, I was pretty much just go, throughout the entire month. But I began to kind of honor and slow down. And I felt an immediate reduction of my PMS symptoms after that. And I've had 2 babies, and I found that my hormones and my PMS have been a little bit wonky since having 2 kids. But I'm happy to report, it's been two and a half years almost since my last one, and just honoring my body and just tuning into how I feel and slowing down when I feel like I need to slow down has really helped alleviate a lot of those mood swings and pain that I experienced before. So thank you for introducing that subject to me.
My pleasure. That is so cool to hear. It's amazing. And actually, I've also worked with lots of people who haven't had their own like natural cycle, and they've been on the pill or something, and then they've gone off and they haven't had it. And through just tuning in to even the moon cycle, because we're so connected to that, and that's something that you can use if you're not menstruating as well, to tap into this same sort of energy, people have had their period come back. And it's so incredibly cool. And I think all it's showing is a disconnection with our body and an expectation that we should always feel the same. And it's just not true. Like every cycle is different. And so if we can, it's so beautiful because it's something that keeps us present. Like our body is keeping us present. And we can only have us solve the pain if we're aware of it, and that requires us to be connected to our body first. So that's so beautiful. And I also just wanted to mention, you just got me thinking with the sacral center. What was so fascinating for me is one of the things I've realized in my shadow was this: I had an issue with laziness almost my whole life, never wanting to be lazy and really judging other people if I felt that they were being lazy. So for me, as a working with my cycle, I've had to learn how to allow myself to rest. And what's so interesting is that we all know with creativity, unless we have space, we can't access that creativity because we can't receive it, and we don't have the energy to sustain it. So by learning how to slow down, I've actually learned how to create way more in my life. And it might not even be in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality, which has made the experience so much more enjoyable and satisfying then. So just something I thought of as you were talking about that.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because we are so conditioned as women, as a society, that we need to produce, we need to be productive, we need to effort, and take all this action. But, the magic happens in the stillness. Like you said, that's when we're able to allow the creativity, we're able to receive it. And then, when it's time when that creative spark, when that action sparks in us, that's when we can really bring it forward and manifest a lot of greatness in our life. And I know that the cycles, being in harmony with our menstrual cycles, is the perfect way to do that. So I want to hear from you, and I'm sure everybody's now dying to know, what are the different stages of our menstrual cycle, and how should we as women, as business owners, be in these times of our cycle to just be in the most harmony with each stage?
Okay, so I love to talk about the 4 seasons, which are the 4 different hormonal phases of the menstrual cycle. And I'll also tell you how you can use it using the moon cycle as well, for anyone who's not experiencing a menstrual cycle right now, or who might have been through, menopause or whatever. Every woman can tap into this. And I also believe men can use it, because it's all just about like a longer term creation, so sustainable creativity. So will start off with the inner winter, which is when we menstruate. So day 1 of your cycle is inner winter. And we usually think about when I ask people, where are you in your menstrual cycle? People usually hear that question and they think just of your period, like that is the menstrual cycle. But your menstrual cycle runs from day 1, the first day that you experience menstruation, you have your period, right up until the day before your next period. That's a full cycle. And however many days that is how long your cycle is. And some months it'll be longer, some will be shorter. Right now, mine has been more like 30 days when it's usually 28. And the delay is usually when I'm traveling. I notice that it'll be late by a couple of days. So you basically want to divide however many days your menstrual cycle is by 4. And these are the 4 seasons. So the first season is your inner winter. That's when you're menstruating. That's the dominant hormonal phase there. It's menstruation. And you might feel that you actually move into inner winter a day or 2 before, and you just start to notice the subtle changes. And the reason that the seasons are so beautiful to use because how you feel in the outer season is how you feel during your inner season. So inner winter, just like the outer season, we usually want to stay indoors. Our energy is lower. We feel like we want more time with ourselves. And this is when hormonally our hormones are at their lowest. So we have this natural physical response to rest more than what we usually need. And because of that need to rest, this puts us in beautiful connection with our intuition, with that space, which is what intuition needs to be heard and received. And so this is all about receiving our inner winter in terms of the creative cycle. This is when we receive those downloads, we receive those ideas. And so it's a beautiful time for that incubation period where you're just receiving, you're reflecting, you're journaling, everything's slower. So for the way that for our energy levels at every stage of the cycle, there's a reason why our energy is at that level. We need to be slow, we need to rest and relax so that we can receive, so that we can surrender and allow and have this information come to us. So that's our inner winter, and it's I think the most important part of the cycle. And if you feel disconnected to your creativity as a business owner or as just a human generally in your life, this is, if you just practice resting during your inner winter, you will start to receive creative ideas. And so if you're using the moon cycle, you can actually use whatever phase you want in the moon cycle, but the way that it's traditionally taught is that this is the new moon phase. And that's because with the new moon, that's when the moon is not seen, it's not illuminated like the full moon. And so before we had light, people would use that time to turn within. And so it was very much a time when women would experience their menstrual cycle. That's not always true though, because there's lots of women who experience the menstrual cycle on the full moon too. So you can flip it if that's what you resonate with more. So after our inner winter, we move into inner spring, and inner spring is the follicular hormonal phase of the menstrual cycle. And this is the first quarter phase of the moon. And so this is when our energy is just naturally starting to build and our hormone levels are starting to rise. We get a kick of testosterone. So this is actually the most masculine phase of the cycle. And this is when we are very focused with our attention. Because we've allowed ourselves to rest after the inner winter, we now want to start getting back out there again, just like in the outer season. We want to get out, we want to play with our ideas, we want to start like physically creating them. And there's so much focused energy here because we've allowed ourselves to rest that we really just want to like get started and do things and focus. And so I think some people get confused here because we think, oh, I've got this energy, so now I want to be out and about around people and be very extroverted. But actually our energy is just rising. We haven't reached the peak of the cycle yet. And so that energy really wants to be channeled usually, but we have to all tune into our personal cycles, to our projects. So it's a beautiful time for that focused attention on the projects that we've received during inner winter. So I use this time to start fleshing out actually create it. So say I've got an online course that I'm creating, I would use the ideas from my inner winter to start putting like a document together and start actually fleshing out those ideas and physically creating the online course. So this is a really important time of the cycle as well. It has its own creative power, and that's the physical creation. And then we move into inner summer, which is for the hormonal phase, that's ovulation. This is the peak of our cycle. And for the moon cycle, if you're using that, this would be your full moon. It's when the moon is illuminated. We can start to see how our manifestations are manifesting. Like, where are they? Do we need to pivot? Are there any changes needed? And in terms of the menstrual cycle, hormonally, because we're ovulating, our body actually changes so that we become more attractive. Like our eyes get bigger, our face, like we're magnetizing. And so this is the time where we want to communicate with people. We want to be around people. We're feeling really extroverted. Our emotional intelligence is really high. And so this social energy, just like the outer season with summer, where we want to get out, we want to chat with our friends, we want to be around people. This is an important part of the creative cycle too, because when we discuss our ideas, or even if we don't even discuss the idea itself, but we just get out around people and we discuss, we create so much more creative energy, and we can bring that back to our creations and infuse it in what we're creating, and our ideas will percolate, and it's just such a beautiful source of creativity too. And practically speaking, it's also the best time in the cycle for launching and marketing your projects. So I usually use this time for, any in-person thing. So if I'm going to run a workshop, I'll do it through my inner summer, because that's when I'm communicating the best. I'll write my sales pages here. I'll write the copy for my courses or my coaching or whatever it is that I'm creating. I'll do it all during my inner summer. But most importantly, this is where I really prioritize just being around people and doing fun and different sort of social things that I might like to hold for my community. So I could run a training, or I might have some other like collective group event with my community, a circle. Such a beautiful time. And our energy is at its highest. So the trouble here is that you don't want to burn yourself out. We have to remember that we're still, even though this is the peak, you still want to conserve that energy. And because we're extroverted, the energy of being around people does also take its toll. So even if you're extroverted, you just have to remember that that is an energy output in and of itself. So I find not expecting too much of myself in terms of creation during this time, but really focusing on allowing myself to have that extroverted phase is really helpful. And so I try to hold back on, having too many deadlines at this time. And then we move into our inner autumn. This is the final stage of the cycle. And so this is a time for completion. This is when we go into the fourth quarter moon, the final stage of the moon cycle as well, which is all about our completion phase. And so we're starting to slow down, and what happens hormonally is this is the luteal phase. Now, the luteal phase actually usually lasts for 7 to 10 days. So you will have crossover of hormonal phases throughout the 4 seasons, but the dominant phase is the luteal phase. And this is when we get our hormone levels actually crash, and then we get another boost of them, and then they fall away again, preparing for inner winter and menstruation. So our emotions are all over the place. They feel like they're a roller coaster. Everything is heightened. And for women, this can feel really confronting. Our inner critic can be very loud at this time, and we can feel like, I just really wish that this wasn't happening. And we can see it as a real negative thing. Actually, though, what is so beautiful is that those emotions are they're showing you something. They're there for a reason. And even though my recommendation is not to make big decisions during this phase, it's more of an information gathering phase. So what are you being shown here? What boundaries are being crossed of yours? What changes do you need? How are you not supporting yourself? And it's going to be very obvious during this time. So it's such a beautiful time to just note down the information that you're receiving, and wait until you're in a winter to make big decisions, because that's when you're going to feel calmer. And you're also, during your inner winter, your left and right brain are communicating the most effectively. So you want to leave big decisions to then, but you need that information from your inner autumn to make them. So it's also a really beautiful time to really get honest with yourself about what needs to change. And then also in terms of your creations, it's a really great time for refining and completing them. I don't know if you've had this, Meghan, but I usually feel this, I just want to tick off everything off my to-do list. I have this natural surge of wanting to complete things. So I use that natural energy to actually bring things to completion and prepare for the next cycle.
That sounds nice. I feel like I've got so many things that are nowhere near completion. I might have to wait for 10 more cycles to tick them off.
Oh, I know. Yeah, but it's amazing because you'll feel like if we just if we wait until we actually have the natural inclination to do these things, and we really trusted that that would come through at the perfect time for it, then we could just wait naturally to the stage of our cycle when we have this energy. And it does come, it always comes. Doesn't mean it's going to come for all of our projects, but if we just trusted, and this is really what the menstrual cycle is about, it's like trusting that there's always another season, there's always another cycle, and everything has its own time. And I feel that now, with everything that's happening globally, it's such a beautiful time for us to really be tuning in to what our needs are. And what I've noticed with myself and my clients is that, during maybe our inner summer and our early inner autumn, our late inner spring, we've all had lots of creative energy and felt really, it's easy to show up for our communities and for ourselves, and we feel very positive about things. But then during the inner winter and that early inner spring and the late autumn, it's like, I just need to take care of myself at the moment. I need to take a step back. I need to rest and relax. And there's this real need for a deep restoration. So I feel that everything at the moment is amplified, and that's a great thing, because it's going to help people tune into the different phases of their cycle. Easier, I guess. It's going to be easier because everything's so much more pronounced. But at the same time, that will feel like a lot of contrast.
Yeah, and as we were talking before we hit record about the fact that we don't have as many external events or people competing for our attention. So it is a beautiful time to really reflect inwards and get to know these inner cycles that perhaps we've just been too busy or too distracted to pay attention to until now. And I totally agree with what you said in terms of the energies also being a lot more intense collectively, that we are picking up on if we know it or not. So in this inner fall, I guess, this inner autumn, when we are having these PMS symptoms, it is a great time to notice the contrast and use the potentially more extreme emotions than usual as opportunities to inquire within, and also just sending out that love and that light into the world too. Because if you're feeling it, and potentially you're not a person that feels it intensely, that it's not just your own energy you're picking up on.
Yes, absolutely. Like, even personally for myself, when I was over in the US, when everything was happening, and I felt really grounded and present and calm the whole time. And then coming back to Australia, which is where I live in Sydney, I still felt that same. I was grounded, present, and calm. And then as I moved into my inner winter, and I'm in this receiving state, and I need this relaxation, and I'm in some ways more sensitive and picking up more on what's happening around me, I felt very, very tired, and like I was processing so much more. And I think it's just so helpful to know that it's whatever you're experiencing right now, like, that's going to pass. And so this is equally beautiful when you do have that inspired energy, because that's why you want to take it up when it's there, because it will pass. And so if you can set yourself, your life up, your business up, so that when you receive that inspired action, and so that you're in the flow, you can take it up, you have enough space in your day, in your diary, to be able to do that. And then also equally, when you need more support during inner winter, during that late inner autumn, you've got that support there, and you've got that time to rest. It makes all of the difference. It really does. And in terms of productivity, we become way more productive, because what we create is just so much of a higher quality, and you've usually used less energy to create it.
I love that. So can you tell me a little bit more of how you work with your clients? Like, I know you've got an online course. I know you have not a mastermind, a mistress mind, right?
Yes.
So what's kind of the process that you work with these women on? What kind of business decisions are you helping them make? And how are you helping them sync their unique businesses with their cycles?
Mm. So yes, I have a couple of different ways that I work with people. I've got Create Your Beautiful Biz, which is a program to help you build that strong foundation in your business. So it's for you if you're getting started, but also if you know that you don't have that strong foundation. So we go through like all of the practical parts of business, but also how to do everything cyclically. So I teach everybody about, tuning into their own body in the different seasons, how to launch cyclically, how to create a product or a program cyclically, how to sell cyclically,
When's the best time to do like finances?
Oh, finances. Yeah. It's so actually inner spring or inner autumn both have their own. So because we're sort of more business minded and like when you think of masculine energy, I think that people think of different things, but the way that I really think of it is like you're like tunnel vision. Whatever's in front of me, you want to be in your cave. It's all about like alone time more than the extroversion.
That's
That's
like
actually
building
way
like
more feminine.
sales funnels and,
Yeah.
web back end of WordPress kind of time too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But then equally, I found for myself, inner autumn is a really beautiful time for finances because I'm just like, you know what? I just want to get things done and I want this like crossed off my list so I can be more like just what needs to get done. Let's do it. And also, let's be honest about what expenses do I want to cut or, what's happening with my income. That is a really nice time for me because I just naturally seem to do it. So I would recommend like putting it in your diary in either inner spring or inner autumn
Or
and then
both.
just seeing, yeah, or both, exactly. And seeing naturally where you feel the most like inspiration to do it. So I teach just anything that I can. I love to explain concepts cyclically. I feel that no matter what you're creating, no matter what you're doing in business, there is like a way to break that down into different seasons. And it just makes it so much like big projects so much easier to tackle then. So that's Create Your Beautiful Biz. And I love it to see how people, what everybody gains from their own cycle. It really is such an incredible self-discovery process, and it builds so much confidence in yourself as a business owner because you start to realize naturally where your strengths are and that we all have strengths for all of the different things we've got to do as business owners, which are, a lot of different things. We all have those strengths. It's just that they're at different times of the cycle. So that's Create Your Beautiful Biz. And then I also work with people one-to-one. And so working with me one-to-one is like, okay, where are you today in your cycle? And as a coach, this is really beautiful information to know for yourself on how you can support that your client during that time. And then also for the client to know that, like, for instance, during inner autumn, I help a lot on mindset as well, because like we just can't do anything without our mindset being aligned to support us. And during inner autumn, if I see a client there compared to in a summer or in a spring or even in a winter, they're going to have a lot more resistance and probably be quite defensive. And it's beautiful for them to know that, look, I'm in my inner autumn, so my resistance is quite high now, and for me to be able to support them through that. And so my coaching will slightly change depending on where someone is, to be able to just to hold them in the best way possible. So this is how we use the cycle there. And in terms of like working together, we're always working on, growing the business. And so we do the practical stuff, the mindset, but then also the cyclical. And it really is more than anything a self-discovery process for my client. And then I also have an annual Mistress Mind, which I'm about to launch, and that's really exciting. And that's for people who are, they've got the foundation in place, but they're looking now to really grow and create, more consistent income and take their business to whatever that next level is. And I love the Mistress Mind because we all tune into where we are in our cycle in every single call. So we know where everybody's at, we know how everybody's feeling, and we use that energy to create cyclically and to support one another. So if you've got some people in the mastermind, the Mistress Mind, who are in their inner summer and their inner spring, like the support that they provide to the group is different than the support that the people during their inner winter or their inner autumn might be providing. And they're both like amazing, but we're all just sort of balancing each other. So it's really cool to see how empowering that is.
Yeah, and it's not very common that you'd be with a group of women and be like, hey, where in your cycle are you right now? Right. And then have the understanding of what that actually means. But to be able to be in a
Exactly.
supportive network where you're observing these cycles, not only in yourself, but other people, and,
Mm.
paying attention to the rhythms in that group would be super interesting.
It's fascinating. And I should say, I also work with like a lot of people who aren't experiencing a menstrual cycle for, whatever, whether it's like they're postmenopausal or whether they're on the contraceptive pill and they're not experiencing, because what usually happens if you are on the pill is you're sort of in one phase. It feels like you're in, a lot of people say inner autumn, the whole cycle.
Oh,
But you can still,
that's the
yeah,
worst one.
I know. I know, but it's kind of like a bit more subtle. And but you can still work with the moon and tap into the different cycles. And you might notice fluctuations within your own cycle. And at the very least, you can still approach the way you create in your business cyclically, because if you try to do the same thing every single day in your business, you're not going to enjoy it, and it's not going to be sustainable, and it doesn't set you up for success. So this is the best thing, because there are different things we have to do in our businesses, and some of them we don't enjoy as much as the others. But if you've got them dedicated to a particular time where you feel like you're more primed to whatever that task is, it's not going to feel as horrible. And so I just feel like there's so much freedom in working this way. And actually, this is why I think it's so amazing for men as well, because the reason, like, our bodies, we have the menstrual cycle so that a woman can hold, this isn't the only purpose, but it's a major purpose. So a woman's body can physically hold a huge creation, which is a baby, right? And that takes 9 months in incubation before it's ready. And so the cycle is set up for big projects. And I always say, like, we've been thinking that we just use this cycle to hold a baby, but it can be to hold other big creations, like a business. And a business, as we all know, is like a baby. The way we need to treat it is like a baby. It's something we're nurturing. It's something that has all like different phases involved in it. And it's a long-term journey. So if we approach our creations with this long-term perspective and create sustainably using something like the menstrual cycle, it just means you don't have the same problems with burnout that a lot of us face, and which I faced in a really big way as a lawyer. And so, yeah, this is why I really feel that it doesn't really matter who you are. You could use the structure of the menstrual cycle just to create sustainably in your business and in your life.
I love that analogy of like birthing a baby and birthing a business. And I absolutely
Yeah.
relate. And I also really feel this balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine, like having that structure, that masculine structure, but really surrendering to the flow of these natural rhythms. Like, it's a really beautiful way to live and to birth a business and any type of creation.
Absolutely. I love that reflection, because that's exactly what it's about. The cycle is all about creating balance in your life, and it's a balance between our masculine and feminine creative superpowers. And that was my journey, because connecting to my body in the menstrual cycle, the body is the feminine, right? And this is where I started to create some balance in my life, because I was so in the masculine. I had to learn the feminine. And I actually have an online course all about this. That was my first online course that I ever created. It's called Embrace Your Feminine Essence. And it was all about the different aspects of our feminine energy, because I had to learn all of that. I had to learn how to trust. I had to learn how to allow, to surrender, to receive, how to be in a community, to think in terms of we rather than I, and all of these beautiful parts of our feminine energy. But alone, if we only, like, I also work with a lot of women who they've got the feminine energy down pat, and it's the masculine that they have to work on. So I really saw, like, part of my purpose in life is to help people tap into both and provide that balance. And so the menstrual cycle is such an easy way to do that, because it naturally taps us into both, and we all have access to both. And some is easier than others, but there might also just be different parts of the creative cycle that you're just not as good at. Like some people are really great at starting but not completing. So the menstrual cycle can also teach you how to fully work a project through from beginning to completion, so that you really build up those weaknesses. I was not great at completing back in the day either.
Maybe I do need to focus more on my inner autumn so I can take those to-dos a little bit sooner.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like you need to learn to love your inner autumn now, Meghan.
Guys, what's coming to me is this way of living and these programs that you're offering are kind of like therapy, right? Self-therapy. And now is such a beautiful time to really master this inherent wisdom that we've been too busy, many of us, to acknowledge, but that's been really driving our emotions and driving our lives and affecting our inner and outer world more than we probably have, even know. So if you're listening to this and you have some time on your hands, I know you do, and you're interested in really tuning in to the natural rhythm and the natural cycles of your menstrual cycle and the moon cycles, and just to have a greater intuitive awareness of all of this, I would highly suggest just checking out Leticia's online course. And for those who have a business already, your Mistress Mind sounds like a great place to be. And how long is that? Is that like 6 months, 3 months? How long is it?
It's going to be 7 months, actually.
7,
It's going to,
okay.
I know. I love the number 7. No, it's just what came through for me is a really great time. And usually it's at different times depending on, what I'm feeling at the time. But I think with everything that we've got going on at the moment, having a longer container that allows for a bit more of slowness is going to be really supportive for everyone. So 7 months is what came through, and I'm really excited to do that. And I feel like the number 7 just has so much power in it as well. So I'm really excited for that. And if anyone is looking to just get started with working with the cycle, I do also have it's a free download, my Menstrual Magic Journal, which just talks about what we've discussed here, but I've also got some prompts of things that you can do to bring a project through from start to finish. So you can like play around with that for your next cycle or with the moon cycle, which is really fun.
Beautiful. Thank you. And we're going to link to all this in the show notes. So if you want to get a copy of this journal and start tracking your cycle, tracking your emotions, tracking how you're feeling, and just getting some insight into how your menstrual cycle is affecting your world, check that out. There'll also be links to create your beautiful business online course and your Mistress Mind. Leticia, this was so fun. It's always so nice to see you and connect in with your energy. You have such a calming and grounding presence. And thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Meghan. I've loved being here, and I love everything that you do. As you know, I'm such a big fan. So thank you everyone for tuning in and sending you so much love.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Leticia, for sharing your wisdom with us. Sisters, this is the perfect time to start tuning into your cycle and optimizing your superpowers throughout the month. You can access Leticia's free Menstrual Magic Journal, as well as more information on her online program, Create Your Beautiful Business, as well as her 7-month business, Mistress Mind, which begins mid-April. All links and details are in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star review or share it with someone you love, and we will see you next week.